November 3rd, 1955, 9:17 p.m., the Copacabana nightclub, Manhattan. 20 mobsters sat around a table, Italian families, Harlem representatives, negotiating territory, business, money. Then Tommy Lucchese said something that made every person in that room stop breathing. He looked directly at Bumpy Johnson and said, "Let's be honest. Harlem's nothing but trash pretending to be a kingdom. You people are just lucky we let you play gangster." The room went silent. Forks stopped midair. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Everyone waited for violence, for Bumpy to explode, to flip the table, to start a war right there. Instead, Bumpy took a sip of his water, set the glass down gently, looked at Tommy Lucchese with eyes that had seen death 1,000 times, and said 7 words that made the most powerful mobsters in New York realize they'd just witnessed something more dangerous than any gun. This is the story of how one sentence can be more terrifying than an army. To understand what happened in the Copacabana that night, you need to understand the power dynamics of 1955 New York. The Italian families controlled most of organized crime in the city. The Lucchese family, the Gambino family, the Genovese family. They had politicians, police, judges, docks, unions, construction. They were an empire. And they viewed Harlem as a colony, a place to extract money, a neighborhood they tolerated but didn't respect. Bumpy Johnson was 50 years old in 1955. He'd been released from Alcatraz 3 years earlier. He'd rebuilt his operations, controlled the numbers racket, protected his community. But he operated with permission from the Italian families. That's how the system worked. They let him run Harlem as long as he paid tribute, as long as he remembered his place. That arrangement worked because both sides benefited. The Italians got money without having to manage a neighborhood they didn't understand. Bumpy got autonomy to protect his people, but respect was always conditional, always fragile. And on November 3rd, 1955, that respect shattered. The meeting at the Copacabana was routine. Every 3 months, representatives from the 5 families met with Bumpy to discuss operations. Make sure territories were respected. Make sure money was flowing correctly. This meeting was supposed to be simple, a formality. But Tommy Lucchese was in a mood. Tommy Three-Finger Brown Lucchese was the boss of one of the 5 families. He was 55 years old, powerful, connected. He'd survived decades in organized crime by being smart and ruthless, but he was also arrogant. And that night, he'd been drinking. Not drunk, just loose, confident. And when powerful men get too confident, they make mistakes. The meeting started normally. Business was discussed, numbers reviewed. Everything was fine. Then someone mentioned a problem. A Lucchese crew had been operating in East Harlem without permission, selling heroin, cutting into Bumpy's territory. Bumpy brought it up calmly, respectfully. "Tommy, your people are pushing into 116th Street. We had an agreement about boundaries." Tommy waved it off. "It's a few blocks. Not a big deal." "But it is a deal," Bumpy said quietly. "We have agreements for a reason." That's when Tommy's tone changed. His face hardened. He looked at Bumpy like someone who'd been tolerating a nuisance too long. "You know what your problem is, Bumpy? You think Harlem matters. You think you're building something important up there. But let's be honest. Harlem's nothing but trash pretending to be a kingdom. You people are just lucky we let you play gangster." The insult was calculated, public, meant to humiliate. Tommy was saying Bumpy wasn't a real gangster, wasn't a real power, was just playing dress-up with permission from his Italian superiors. The room went dead silent. Frank Costello, sitting 2 seats down, closed his eyes, like he knew this was a mistake. Carlo Gambino stopped eating, just watched. The other Italian captains looked uncomfortable. This wasn't how these meetings worked. You didn't disrespect people openly like this, not if you wanted to maintain peace. But Tommy kept going. "You want to talk about agreements? How about this agreement? You operate in Harlem because we allow it. You make money because we permit it. And if we wanted to, we could take it all back tomorrow. So maybe show a little gratitude instead of complaining about a few blocks." Bumpy sat there, didn't move, didn't react. His face showed nothing, but everyone who knew him recognized that stillness, that dangerous calm. One of Bumpy's associates, Illinois Gordon, started to stand up. Bumpy raised one finger. Illinois sat back down. The room waited. Some expected Bumpy to walk out. Some expected him to threaten. Some expected violence. Nobody expected what actually happened. Bumpy picked up his water glass, took a slow sip, set it down with deliberate care. Then he looked directly at Tommy Lucchese and spoke. His voice was quiet, conversational, but it carried to every corner of that room. "Tommy, I know where your daughter goes to school." 7 words. That's all. Then silence. But those 7 words did what no threat, no gun, no army could do. They froze every person in that room. Tommy's face went from red to white in seconds. His mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Frank Costello leaned back in his chair. Carlo Gambino set down his fork very carefully, because everyone understood what Bumpy had just done. He hadn't threatened Tommy's daughter, hadn't said he'd hurt her, hadn't made any explicit threat at all. He'd just stated a fact. "I know where your daughter goes to school." But the implication was clear. You can disrespect me, you can insult Harlem, you can call me trash. But I know things about you. Personal things. Things that matter. And if you push me, if you force me to respond, I won't come after you. I'll remind you that everyone you love is vulnerable. Tommy's daughter Maria was 16 years old. She attended Sacred Heart Academy in the Bronx, a private Catholic school. Tommy was incredibly protective of her. She was his only child, his pride. And the fact that Bumpy knew where she went to school, the fact that he'd brought it up in this context, made Tommy understand something terrifying. Bumpy had been watching, preparing, collecting information, not for immediate use, but for moments exactly like this. Frank Costello broke the silence. His voice was calm but firm. "Tommy, I think you've had too much to drink. Maybe we should take a break." Tommy didn't respond, just stared at Bumpy. Bumpy stared back. No anger, no emotion, just cold calculation. Finally, Tommy spoke. His voice was different now, smaller. "Bumpy, I apologize. What I said was out of line, disrespectful." Bumpy nodded slowly. "Apology accepted. And to clarify, I would never harm your daughter or anyone's family. That's not how I operate. I simply wanted you to understand that respect works both ways. You know things about me. I know things about you. We can use that knowledge to destroy each other, or we can use it to maintain peace." Tommy swallowed hard, nodded. "You're right. I was disrespectful. It won't happen again." "Good," Bumpy said. "Because I value our arrangement. I value stability. But I won't be insulted in front of my peers. I won't let Harlem be called trash." "We're not trash, Tommy. We're people, and we deserve the same respect you demand." He stood up. "Gentlemen, I think we're done for tonight." He looked at Tommy one more time. "We'll talk next week about the 116th Street situation. I'm sure we can come to an understanding." Then he walked out. Illinois Gordon followed. The door closed behind them. For a full minute, nobody spoke. Then Frank Costello addressed the room. "What you just witnessed," he said quietly, "is why Bumpy Johnson is more dangerous than any of us will ever be. He didn't threaten, didn't yell, didn't posture. He stated a fact, and that fact contained more violence than any explicit threat." Carlo Gambino nodded. He's been watching Tommy's family. Probably for years, probably knows more than just where the daughter goes to school. That's strategy. That's patience. That's power. Tommy Lucchese sat there. His hands were shaking. One of his captains leaned over. "Boss, you want us to do something about this?" "About what?" Tommy asked bitterly. He didn't threaten anyone. He just said he knows where Maria goes to school, which is probably public information anyway, but we all know what he meant. The captain pressed. "So we let this slide? We let him disrespect you?" Tommy laughed, a hollow sound. "He didn't disrespect me. I disrespected him. And he reminded me that I'm not untouchable, that my family's not untouchable, that he has the same kind of information on me that I have on him." He stood up. "We're leaving, and we're pulling our crew out of 116th Street. Tomorrow, over the next week, the story of what happened at the Copacabana spread through the underworld. The details varied. Some said Bumpy threatened to kill Tommy's daughter. Some said he had men watching her school. Some said he'd planned a kidnapping. But the people who were actually there knew the truth. Bumpy had done something more sophisticated than any threat. He'd demonstrated knowledge, demonstrated that he'd been paying attention, that he knew vulnerabilities. And that knowledge, that surveillance, that preparation was more terrifying than any weapon. A week later, Tommy Lucchese requested a private meeting with Bumpy. They met at a restaurant in neutral territory. Tommy came alone, so did Bumpy. They sat across from each other. Tommy spoke first. "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation. I was drunk. I was showing off, and I forgot who I was talking to." Bumpy nodded. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we handle them after." Tommy leaned forward. "But I need to know. My daughter. Were you actually watching her? Or was that a bluff?" Bumpy smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Tommy, I've been in this life for 30 years. I've learned that the best defense is information. I know where most people's families live, where they work, where they eat, where they're vulnerable. Not because I plan to hurt them, but because knowledge is power. And if someone forces me to defend myself, I want options." Tommy absorbed that. "So you've been watching my family for how long?" "Years," Bumpy said simply. "You, Carlo, Frank, Vito, all of you. Because I knew that one day someone would push too far, would cross a line, and I needed to be ready." Tommy sat back. "Respect. That's real strategy." Bumpy shook his head. "It's survival. You have the Italian army behind you. You have money, politicians, judges. I have Harlem. That's it. So I have to be smarter, have to think further ahead, have to make sure that even if you could destroy me, the cost would be too high." Tommy nodded slowly. "And the cost would be my family." "No," Bumpy corrected. "The cost would be the knowledge that everyone's family is vulnerable. Mine, yours, everyone's. If we start targeting families, if we break that unwritten rule, then nobody's safe. Not your daughter, not my wife, not anyone's children. That's mutually assured destruction. And nobody wins." Tommy extended his hand. "You're right, and I won't forget this lesson." Bumpy shook his hand. "Neither will I." They parted ways. The territorial dispute was resolved. The Lucchese crew pulled out of 116th Street, and for the rest of their lives, Tommy Lucchese and Bumpy Johnson maintained a cautious respect. Never friendly, never close, but respectful. Because both men understood something fundamental. Power isn't about who can inflict the most damage. It's about who has the most to lose. And on November 3rd, 1955, Bumpy Johnson reminded the most powerful mobsters in New York that everyone has something to lose. Years later, in 1967, a reporter asked Bumpy about the Copacabana incident, asked what he would have actually done if Tommy hadn't apologized. Bumpy was quiet for a long time. Then he answered, "Nothing. I would have done nothing." The reporter was confused. "But you implied you'd hurt his daughter." "No," Bumpy said firmly. "I stated a fact. I know where his daughter goes to school. That's all I said. The threat was in Tommy's imagination, in his guilt, in his fear. I would never harm a child. Never. But I didn't need to say that. Because the implication, the possibility, was more powerful than any explicit threat. That's the genius of what Bumpy did. He didn't cross a line, didn't make a threat that could be reported or retaliated against. He simply demonstrated knowledge and let fear do the rest. 7 words. "I know where your daughter goes to school." That's all it took to freeze a room full of killers, to make a powerful mob boss apologize, to establish respect without firing a shot. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't what you'll do. It's what people imagine you might do, and imagination is always more terrifying than reality. If this story moved you, subscribe. Drop a like if you understand that information is the ultimate power. Share this with someone who needs to know that real strength isn't about violence, it's about strategy. And in the comments, tell me, what would you have said in Bumpy's position? More legendary stories coming next. Don't miss them.